Members, we're dealing with the Criminal Code Amendment Post and Boast Offence Bill 2025, and the question is the bill be read a second time. The Honourable Rod Caddies.
Thanks, Deputy President. I'd like to speak out against this Post and Boast bill and voice my opposition to it. I think no amount of amendments to this bill can redeem it. These proposed laws do not make sense. They're unnecessary and ultimately they're dangerous. At the core of this bill is the regulation of speech. This is a bill which is designed to regulate what people can and cannot discuss. It denies people the freedom of sharing any content, well, certain content. Of course, we have other areas where, as a society, we decide that speech must be limited in terms of what we can share, what people can share, such as child abuse material and instructions on how to perform acts of terrorism, things like that. It's true. We already have such laws, and rightly so. But the balance between free speech and regulation of such is something that is important, and the weighting should always be on the side of free speech. In a democracy, it's important that the citizens can express themselves and share information. These Post and Boast laws deal with the regulation of speech as such. We should be very careful. Another consideration we should have is the likely effectiveness and operational impact these laws will have on our police and our justice system. At a time when there are not enough police on the roads, do we really need to have the resources? Do we really have the resources to investigate and charge someone for Facebook posts of another person doing a burnout? I mean, it's just going to clog up our courts, take up time with our police, and as we've heard mentioned already about that it's not rife in this state. We don't even really have a problem. I've spent plenty of time on social media over leading up to the election, and I haven't seen once in a whole year it happening. So obviously, and I'm on there a lot, maybe it's happening, but I didn't see a lot of it. So it's obviously not too much of a problem. At a time when our courts are already strained, where people have to wait months or even years for their cases to be heard, do judges really need to deal with cases like someone on a video waving their hand or something, putting their hands up, and then there's debate over whether it's a Nazi salute? When our prisons are dangerously overcrowded already, do we really have room to send people to jail for posting a video of unlawful assembly, like we saw in the protests against the government during the COVID period? The seeming intent of this proposed law may be benign. However, the way they are written enable them to be abused for repression in the future government by a future government if they were inclined to do so. For instance, people who posted videos of the protest by climate activists at the Woodside building, they could be prosecuted under these laws. There was an unlawful assembly and disorderly behaviour, so maybe even some members in this chamber could be prosecuted. The justifications provided for these laws simply don't hold up under scrutiny. They lack the substance and the clarity needed to warrant such measures, failing short of addressing the real issues at hand. The claim that social media posts glorifying crime are the primary cause of further crime, it's dubious and it lacks robust evidence. The way to address crime is to have enough police on the streets and enough capacity in our courts and our prisons effectively to deal with offenders. It also strikes me as odd that police don't welcome the posting of crimes on social media to a certain extent, as I imagine it would be more efficient if you had video evidence of offending so that they could get these people and prosecute them. There are many more problems with the way this bill is written, and I'll go through them in a bit more detail to explain why I don't think it can be supported in any form. The inclusion of unlawful assembly and disorderly conduct in these laws raises serious concerns, as it dangerously encroaches on the fundamental right for free speech. This type of law, which brands protests and civil disobedience against government policy as unlawful, mirrors the tactics of authoritarian regimes used to suppress dissent, as seen during COVID, through the COVID era. A future government could weaponise these laws to crush citizen journalism, criminalising dissent and silencing voices that dare to challenge the status quo. A future government could exploit the law's vague provision, allowing them to arbitrarily regulate any speech by adding new offences through regulation, threatening free expression. Any bill that allows sweeping changes to its intent through regulation, bypassing parliamentary scrutiny, is fundamentally unacceptable and undermines democratic accountability. Put simply, regulators must not have the power to add new offences that alter the legislation's original purpose. The next serious problem with the way this bill is written is that it only provides defences to people rather than exemptions. This means that this law could be used to intimidate and repress certain lawful speech by charging people with offences under this Act and placing the burden on the accused to defend themselves in court. So although there are exemptions for intelligence agents for some reason, there's no exemptions for everyday West Australians. They will have to defend themselves at court at a significant cost. The fact that citizen journalism will have to rely on a defence rather than an exemption will act as a deterrent to posting some content which may be in the public interest, such as proof of wrongdoing by representatives of government. The truth is this law lets authorities charge people to bully them into deleting content they don't like, stifling free speech. Then we have the specific inclusion of road traffic offences and Nazi salutes, and the omission of a range of other crimes. In relation to the road traffic offences, the danger to society is not from the videos of criminal behaviour. The danger is caused by the lack of police on our roads to act as a real deterrent to such behaviour. This legislation specifically includes the promotion of Nazi ideas as being a relevant offence. The lessons we should be learning from Nazi Germany is the danger of authoritarianism and how society can descend into hell if we don't respect individual rights and core democratic principles such as freedom of speech. This is the sort of law that could easily be abused by future governments to implement authoritarianism, so that maybe we should be more concerned about that and some frustrated and poorly informed young blokes doing stupid Nazi salutes. Indeed, these are the sorts of laws that the Nazis passed to consolidate their power. Seemingly reasonable, but able to be used for repression at a later stage. I also agree with others in this chamber that an omission of animal cruelty offences is odd. So basically, this government thinks the Nazi salute by some idiots is worse than animal abuse. For some reason, this bill also allows for the regulation of what people can share between themselves on a USB drive or private communication channels. If the intent of this bill is to stop sharing of content to a wide audience to discourage copycat behaviour, why is this needed? Does this provision give police the power to invade people's privacy on a suspicion of having a video depicting a crime? Surely this opens the door to serious misconduct, and it definitely disregards core democratic values in the form of a right to privacy. Again, this is a law that an authoritarian regime could use to crush free speech and dissent in the future. I'll now talk about the UK for a moment. Some members may not be aware of what's happening there, in terms of free speech and government repression. In the UK, they've made it illegal to post hate speech, which includes criticism of their immigration policy. There are instances in the UK where elderly people are being arrested and imprisoned for posting their disgust with the effects of illegal immigration on their local communities.
Member, I will leave the chair until the ringing of the bells.
Instead of distracting from the crisis in police and justice with headline-grabbing legislation, the government should concentrate on addressing its shortcomings in those areas. I understand that well-meaning amendments will be proposed to the bill. You know, we can try to change it, and you know, there'll be people speaking shortly, probably about moving it to committee and stuff. But I don't think this bill can be fixed. I encourage members to vote against this bill for the reasons I've outlined, unless you want to be complicit in enabling poor legislation to pass just for short-term media optics. I'll no doubt be accused of being irresponsible and not tough on crime for not supporting this bill. I might even be called a conspiracy theorist for daring to imagine that a future government could use this legislation for repression of the WA people's rights to free speech. But I'm not worried about that. I'm more worried about what this bill could enable in the future. On a superficial level, this bill looks like it's just about cracking down on hoons and antisocial behaviour, but there's a lot more to it. This bill is a tool for tyranny. It opens the door to repressing any speech a future government deems to be unacceptable, and that is why One Nation opposes it. One Nation does not support creating tools that can undermine our core freedoms and rights as citizens in a democracy. I encourage my colleagues on the crossbench and in the opposition alliance to oppose this bill with me for the reasons I've outlined. If you think my concerns are unreasonable, just look at what's happening in the UK, where the UK Labor government is using the similar laws to repress free speech and harass everyday Britons. We don't need this bill. The best case scenario is that it will result in everyday West Australians being caught up in a justice system, causing significant disruption to their lives over trivial matters, and maybe an unmeasurable reduction of copycat behaviour of some offences. The worst case scenario is that this law will be used by a future government to become increasingly authoritarian. The government will also argue this is to protect victims of crime. However, this is also not a reason to restrict free speech. Core democratic principles are more important than individuals' feelings. I'll leave it on there. We've heard from the Honourable Nick Garan. You could see he had real issues with the bill, and so I'm not alone in seeing that this bill isn't good for this state. I think there's so many other things that probably needed to be brought before this Parliament before this should have been put here. So that's another problem I have with it, that we're bringing forward a piece of legislation that isn't a real problem really in this state, when there's so many other things out in Western Australia that needed attention to. So thank you. I'll finish there.